Welcome, adventurer. I'm DirkPickle, and this is my tavern. Please find a seat and relax by the fire. And listen in, for we all have our tales to tell. Today's tale is titled, The DM Doesn't Seem to Want Players to Make Characters. The party is split and never shall they meet. So, a small group of friends and I had been wanting to play D&D. As luck would have it, my good friend had a boyfriend who DM'd, and he agreed to run a 5e D&D game for us. It would be my first Dungeons & Dragons game, though not my first RPG. My usual games of choice are Paranoia and Call of Cthulhu, and I'm a passable GM for both, though I prefer to play. Pretty much all of us have been writing together for years. We actually met through text-based RPs. I was pretty stoked at the chance to play Dungeons & Dragons, and had come up with the idea of a character I'd like to play. And that's where I ran into the first setback. He wouldn't approve anyone's characters. My initial concept was a tiefling who was a bard pretending to be a paladin, to the point where he would hopefully become one in the future, which was a funny contrast to the barbarian's initial concept, that they were a paladin in denial, who insisted they were just a simple person. This was a very different character from my usual, since I tend to write monsters and villains and horror. To really sell the ruse, I've been hoping to play a Zariel tiefling, but would have been fine with a regular tiefling if he decided not to allow subraces. The DM had said only official stuff would be allowed, but I figured he might approve Unearthed Arcana. He said I could play a tiefling, but he'd pick the subrace, and I wouldn't know until I was level 10. He tried to tell me that was how tieflings actually worked, and that really I should be rolling for what subrace I was. I maybe knew, but I was certain that wasn't correct. Since you start off with different stats and you get different racial abilities at level 2 and 3. He also said I should be grateful he was letting me use a subrace at all. I would have been fine with just a regular tiefling, but he insisted that he'd still choose the subrace at level 10, even if I was a regular tiefling. He also argued that the rulebook said it was up to the GM what kind of tiefling I played. Two friends and my brother, who all actually had experience with Dungeons & Dragons, were like, no. It's up to the GM if they allow the subrace, but the GM doesn't get to pick the subrace. I may have been willing to work with him on this, but it's a new DM, and he refused to tell us anything about the campaign. Not the setting, not a plot hook, nothing. So we couldn't work together at all, to even make sure our characters were compatible enough to talk to each other. According to the DM's girlfriend, this was intentional. He didn't want us to make characters that would work together easily. Not knowing the setting was making character creation difficult, because how am I supposed to make a backstory? Is this Forgotten Realms? Eberron? No idea, because he won't talk. Everything is just, you'll find out when we start. Bitter at his whole attitude, I considered just playing a human paladin, but that left a bad taste in my mouth. When I come up with a character concept, I come up with a full character. I can't just change one aspect of it, because then it's a different character. With how we're all writers, naturally we're big on the storytelling and RP aspect, and are all very familiar with each other's character preferences and style, and know how to work well together. I don't think he was ready for us, as his usual group spends half the time drunk in real life, and trying to seduce everything in sight. With one periodically declaring, I'm a Khajiit, for no apparent reason. Given that attitude, I can understand a bit about the railroading and his rule for playing your own gender, since I'm sure he had plenty of, I want to be a sexy man, sexy woman players who faff about. It took a lot of iterations and me losing my shit because he kept denying my characters, even when they were 100% within the rules and nothing too unreasonable. Drow Gulok? No. No Drow. That's fine, I can respect no Drow as GM's choice, though he had approved a Drow Ranger with a pet leopard. Definitely not a panther named Gwenhwyvar. It's a leopard named Guinevere, named Britst Boerden when I suggested playing that. So I don't know. And no, he has no idea who Dritz is. Wood Elf Ranger? No, he's sick of elf characters. After I'd spitballed a dozen more ideas at him, he threw up his hands and said, just pick something, I'll approve it. Being the kind, considerate player I am, I didn't go too wild. Just did something I was comfortable with, but figured wouldn't be too big of a deal. Oh, and multiclassing also wasn't allowed. Limiting, but I can work with that. I ended up with a chaotic neutral half-orc druid, which I was less enthusiastic about, but figured I could enjoy. A follower of Malar based vaguely on skinwalkers since I thought that was a neat concept. For petty fun, I had him be the son of a character I frequently wrote with this group of friends, even though I knew it wouldn't ever come up. Just a nice fun fact for myself to make playing what was like my 15th choice more entertaining. GM had banned changelings or shifters or doppelgangers as a race, but that's fine. I could wait till I hit level 14 and got the alter self spell. He didn't help me with the character sheet either. I ended up watching a YouTube video to figure out how to fill it out, and then had the barbarian look it over to make sure it was all correct. I later found out it wasn't just me he had a problem with. He denied over 40 of the Bloodhunter's character ideas, until she lost her shit at him too. He never said what was wrong or why, just it won't work. She was finally allowed to play a Goliath Bloodhunter, which I thought interesting after he'd gone on and on about how he would only allow official stuff, but I didn't really care enough to say anything. I worried if I drew attention to it he'd ban that too. Finally, we were able to settle on the following. Take a note of the character ages, they'll briefly come into play later. The tyrannical DM has been playing for 10 years and DMing for 9. Me, a half-orc druid who didn't care at all for civilization, my character age 39. My brother, a halfling bard aged 100, has Dungeons & Dragons experience and does good at DMing, just would much rather play. My good friend and the GM's girlfriend, a Goliath Bloodhunter raised in the woods, character age 29, and also has Dungeons & Dragons experience as a player. Another friend who just went with a human barbarian after seeing the difficulty in making characters, character age 20s I think. Experience in both DMing and playing, both D&D and other games. And another friend who shows up late with just a vague idea of, I want to be a dwarf rogue, no actual character, has never played a tabletop role-playing game. The DM also dropped the bombshell that I play advanced D&D with special rules. Yep, it's a homebrew campaign. Apparently rather than just leveling up normally, all your stats are raised when he plays, so that he can get us to max level as soon as possible, because he has an awesome campaign planned if we get to that level. He'd spend so much time insisting that it was a regular game of Dungeons & Dragons, and he only did stuff with official rulebooks. Rules for we, but not for he, apparently. Man, I wish he'd said it was homebrew 2 weeks ago when I was making my first character. I would have fought him a lot less. Suddenly, all his decisions were making a lot more sense. Now that we knew it was homebrew, he's also mentioned he had a character made to keep us in line. We weren't sure what that meant, especially given he'd never played with us before. He had no idea what kind of characters we made, nor what we usually wrote or played. Anyway, there's tentative plans to play at some point, and in the meantime I ran a quick paranoia one-shot for the Bloodhunter, Bard, Barbarian and another friend. The next day he's all, we're playing tonight, everyone, let's go. I found out after the fact that he did not actually have any of his notes and was going entirely off memory. It was a spur of the moment thing that seriously felt like, oh, Lumen ran a game, time to show him how it's done. What made it worse is he had time to go and get his notes, since it took us about 2 hours for everyone to make themselves available to play on such random short notice. So, we finally get settled in, using Discord to play, for some reason. I don't know if he just didn't want to take the time to learn how to use Roll20 or what, but it's all going to be audio only. I'm fine with that, every game has handouts. It does make for an exceptionally boring game though when your DM isn't the best storyteller and is just going off of memory. The setting is the plane of Obnis. The X is silent, make of that what you will. It used to be a happy, joyful place, until someone died. I think it was the Queen, but I was only half paying attention honestly. I was still focused on that silent X in Obnis, you see. Anyway, the king retreated from public view to mourn. And this all happened when your characters were 13. Whoa, stop right there. When all our characters were 13? Because we're all different ages. Yeah, some of you were a little older, like 14. So around 13, 14 years old for all of you. Alright, so apparently we're all the same age now. Carry on. The king is now back after being away for some time. And now he's different. No longer is he happy and kind. He's changed, cruel and merciless. The smallest infraction means death. Where once public executions were rare, they're now a popular pastime because there's so many of them. So you're in the town of Nis. There's that silent X again. The city is jam-packed, built to only hold 1,000, and it now holds 4 times that, as the smaller villages failed or became too dangerous to live in. What with all the monsters that have sprung up. You've all moved there from the small villages you were raised in. Wait, what? The barbarian is sort of from a village, but she's just passing through the city. My backstory specifically mentioned my nomadic tribe breaking up, and while some of them went to live in cities or absorbed by other tribes, I decided to go live in the forest. The blood hunter was captured by a hag when she was young and lived in a forest until her late teens. And then she's been moving from place to place ever since. The only character who has a backstory that suits this is the halfling, who was part of a gang when he was younger and is a city sort. Later, the GM confessed he didn't actually read anyone's backstory. Continuing on. There's a bar called The Beat, and the bard is playing there. There's also a gladiator arena about 100 feet from the bar, and there's also a business district with a marketplace. Where are you guys at? You're only going to set up where the bard is? Alright. So I guess I'll be in the bar too, sitting at a table. The blood hunter has decided to be there too, at the bar proper. The barbarian is headed into the bar from the arena, although she never actually makes it to the bar proper, since someone bumps into her and steals her wallet. She gives chase and catches the thief. It's then made very clear that we can't be breaking any laws since the thief gets hauled off to the gallows. The bard is making performance rolls. This is all he will do. He spends the entire session at the bar making performance rolls every hour or so until the bar closes 6 hours later at 10 PM. At which point he will go watch executions for the next 3 hours apparently. He didn't get to do much, and I felt bad because he stopped playing games online with his friends to come to do this. The barbarian didn't do much either. She chased down the thief, went to the bar for half a minute and left immediately after due to the stench, explained why shortly. To go and watch executions, and that's it. She might have listened into a conversation at some point, but I was zoning out. We pretty much only paid attention when he said our names. Anyway, back to the bar. The blood hunter overhears some stuff. The band playing sucks, so patrons are throwing drinks. I attempt to hit the lute player but fail. Bartender looks scared. Blood hunter presses him for information, and then what is presumably the big bad walks in. Black dyed armour? Check. Spikes? Check. Bald? Check. Heavily scarred face? Check. Evil aura? Check. We have to make detect magic rolls of some kind that will let us know if something is magic, but not what kind. I think in this case it was more of a con roll, since when I failed, I began to puke. I was not able to projectile vomit far enough to hit the bard, unfortunately. The bard freezes completely, and the blood hunter basically gets a surge of adrenaline. It's about at this point the dwarf rogue player shows up, and a couple of minutes are taken to roll some quick stats for her, but only a few. The DM forgot to help her roll all of her basic stats. I don't know what I expected. This was the same DM who told me that rogues are the ones with a pet animal. The rogue overhears some important details. I don't know what they are because I wasn't paying attention. She then follows the big bad as he leaves to find out what he's up to. The blood hunter also follows, because it's kind of her job to stop evil. My druid was just embarrassed he'd puked and was trying to get out of there as soon as possible. The DM assumes I'm following too, and I'm just like, sure, fine. So we all roll to hide. Everyone passes but me. But whatever, no apparent consequences. It does make for some hilarity when I have to roll to hide later and get the same score. Apparently my druid doesn't care that he's not sneaky and decided not to try and be more sneaky. The barbarian tries to go into the bar but immediately leaves due to the puke smell. The DM asks her if she goes with us and she says no. She's going to go watch the executions or something. She has no reason to follow us. Time for a time skip. All of a sudden it's 6 hours later. That's right, we've been training this dude for 6 hours. Do we get a say in this? No, it's 6 hours. We've been following him for that long. It's 10 PM. He had stopped at a couple of places and was sketchy. He's leaving town. Do we follow? You know what? Sure. In for a penny, in for a pound. Let's follow him. The party's now completely split and the DM is so excited. I thought I'd have to work to split you up, but you're doing it yourselves. I don't know what you're so excited for, dude, since we haven't actually been together at any point. We haven't even talked to each other. The blood hunter got to RP a bit in talking to the bartender, and the closest I got to RP was deciding to throw my drink at the band, first at the lute player and then at the bard. The bard has been playing in the bar the whole time, and the barbarian is wandering around aimlessly. For the next bit, the DM mostly focuses on the three of us leaving the city, occasionally remembering the bard and barbarian exist, but at no point do the bard and barbarian meet, even though they both go to watch the executions, since the bar closes, so the bard is forced to leave. So the druid, blood hunter and rogue roll for hide. Everyone passes but me. DM lets me re-roll. Every session he allows each player a total of 3 reroll tokens, which is nice of him. I did like that aspect. Once you've used up your 3 tokens, you can't do it again till next session, in which you get 3 more tokens. So I finally pass, and I'm finally sneaky. The DM makes it clear that we all know not to go out of the city alone at night, because there's been attacks, bandits, animals, monsters, etc. He's trying to establish this dude as a badass, I think. My suspicions on this are confirmed when he describes what happens next. Oh, by the way, it's suddenly 3 hours later. No, we don't get to do hourly checks. The big bad looks at a tree, sneers and touches it, and it starts to wither and die. The big 12-foot tall bear attacks him, hits him on the shoulder, and the dude is unmoved. Touches the bear ages rapidly to become a skeleton. Then he walks around the corner and disappears. We investigate and are told that the only spell close to that takes weeks to have effect, so clearly dealing with something powerful. Oh, also we've been following an illusionary clone. The big bad wasn't actually there. So we're 3 hours from the city, and this is the first time we're actually getting to talk to each other. We haven't spoken to each other the entire 9 hours apparently. Just each silently stalk the big bad and each other for various reasons of our own. I'm struggling to justify why my druid was still following. But he's a follower of Malar, so maybe he's decided to hunt the big bad, I don't know. Anyway, the rogue hints they have juicy secrets and will sell them to us, but neither I nor the blood hunter are buying. A, we have no money. B, both of us are convinced that we don't need whatever the rogue is selling. And C, we have no reason to trust the rogue either. We didn't actually talk this out. A separate channel is made on the server and we type it out while the DM remembers the barbarian and bard exist. The rogue turns down my offer to pay with my body. It's 2 AM game time, so we figure we should make camp. We don't care for each other, but we're already there. And there's a small amount of safety in numbers, given how people have been attacked. The DM hints this is a bad idea. We're like, dude, we're 3 hours from the city. It's been a long night. We're going to make camp. The DM flat out says, you should not stay out of the city at night. You shouldn't sleep out there. It's a bad idea. This is the DM telling you this. Alright, so I guess we're going to trudge back to the city and get there at 5 AM. Great. Rogue says they're going to go to the mayor's house and investigate that when we get back and invites us to join. We say we'll sell our bodyguard services for 50 silver. Out of character, the rogue player suggests we do go together, but neither our characters have been given incentive to. My druid is somewhat willing to see it out and investigates for curiosity's sake, but overall has no reason to, is frustrated about the clone and about ready to just leave the city. The blood hunter is pretty sure she doesn't need help with solving this mystery since hunting bad things is basically their job, and our character doesn't like rogue for hoarding information. And that's where it ends because I couldn't bear another minute of it and claimed I was tired and was going to go to bed. So, to recap, 3 of us follow the big bad that turns out to be an illusion for 9 hours. Only talk once, and that's to establish our characters don't get along. Spend 3 hours walking back to the city because the DM says so. The bard plays in a bar for 6 hours, then spends 3 hours watching executions. The barbarian gets robbed and then watches executions. All in a 2.5 hour session. After the session ends, but before we all leave voice chat, the GM says, so what did you think? I complain about how split we are in the glacial pace of the session, and how dull it is between the two. What do you mean I brought the 3 of you together already? I just can't even. And there we have it. I think in this story, what we ultimately have is a DM that's so desperate to tell a story, and it's pretty clearly stated that his other group is, for the best part, not even really playing Dungeons and Dragons. They are in a sense, but they're all actually just getting drunk and then murder hoboing or trying to make seduction rolls, whilst this DM very, very clearly wants to be able to tell a story. And I think perhaps the DM couldn't make the connection that this group would potentially be very, very different from the group that they currently have. So they structured it in such a way that it would railroad the group in the hopes that they would adhere to the story that he'd set out. There's some pity on my end for that DM because you can kind of see some elements of the DM struggle there, and unfortunately he just took it way too far with a group of people that he didn't know. Really, it goes both ways. It seems to me that even from the writer of this story's perspective, they could have perhaps given a little more leeway towards the DM. They even said at the beginning they were already starting to clock out. Your first session's 2.5 hours. You could probably, as a courtesy, try and pay a little bit of attention just to see where things are going. And perhaps, you never know, it could have been salvageable if people were willing to jump in just that little bit more. That's just what I think. What about you? What do you think? Is there any one sole target that's to be blamed for this? Or is it a myriad of poor decisions and unfortunate circumstances? I look forward to seeing what you have to say. That's all from me. But remember, the tavern is always open. Good night.